All right, hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine, and Pipeline or CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Mike Barton, who is in the lovely state of Utah. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Yeah, and Mike is a marketing communications leader focused on making the internet more accessible. As VP of Corporate Communications and Content Marketing at AudioEye, he leads strategy driving awareness through blog, social media, PR, video, and digital storytelling. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Is we're going to talk about digital accessibility. And and I think a lot of people think about that as a kind of a moral or legal kind of obligation, but you would argue that it also has a strategic business component too.
Yeah, for sure. Taking a step back, digital accessibility, for those who it might be a new concept for,
Mhm.
which is actually surprisingly not that uncommon, is really just making sure that the digital world, websites, mobile apps, any digital experience you might have works for all people. So somebody who's blind, who's using a screen reader, coming to your site, does the navigation and the pathing
Mhm.
that you have on that site. Does that work on a screen reader for somebody who's deaf or hard of hearing? Does your video and other content have the right accessibility best practices in place so that they can similarly consume content? So at the very base, you're right. Like a lot of people will say, "Hey, that's the right thing to do. We should do it," but then you get into business mode and it becomes, well, we've got a lot of priorities, right? We've got a lot of things that we
Mhm.
need to put money towards. We've got growth. We could be doing more with personalization and targeting.
Mhm.
So maybe that'll be a 2026 thing or a 2027 thing,
Right.
right? But the reality is that accessibility, when you're thinking about it from a digital perspective, has SEO benefits, it has usability benefits. Overall, it has really just for all users, uh, better clarity, better consumption. So I like to say that it's a prime example of a rising tide
Mhm.
lifts all boats. And so that's really what we are talking with a lot of business leaders about. That while it might seem like just the right thing to do or a compliance checkbox so that
Mhm.
you are not sued, like you said,
Right.
the reality is it can actually be a driver of business and growth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I mean, and to be honest, for most companies now, at the very basic, I mean, yeah, there is a legal issue there. I mean, if you want to, if you don't, if you don't make your sites and all your assets accessible. But I guess a lot of companies, and you mentioned this a few moments ago, it's like, oh, we want to do this, it's the right thing to do, but it's going to suck up resources, or
Right.
it kind of looks hard, so I'm going to file it under too hard for right now and push it off. So unintentionally, kind of excluding people. How do you when you work with companies, how do you help them reorient that thinking?
Yeah. So I like to somewhat kind of position it in thinking about the physical world
Hmm.
where accessibility and disability is visually around us all the time, right? You go to a store and there's an automatic door that allows people in wheelchairs to easily go in, or you've got curb cuts on the sidewalk so that people with wheelchairs, when you're trying to cross a road, right, you've got the auditory signal of when to cross and when not to cross. And so those are in place so that a person can literally enter your establishment and do business with you.
Hmm.
And those are in place so that, again, all people have the same opportunity to do business with you. In the digital world, that's all behind the scenes in the code, all the
Hmm.
accessibility. And so, truly, if you are not intentionally building your site with accessibility in mind, those digital doors for customers are closed.
Right.
And people are often surprised to find that 1 in 4 people in the US have a disability of some sort. That doesn't mean, that everybody's blind, obviously, or everybody's
Sure,
deaf,
sure,
but
sure.
there's cognitive disabilities, there's disabilities of mobility to make it difficult to use a mouse. So people might only use a keyboard. But I like to frame it that way, which is as a marketer, as a business, you're paying all this money to bring customers to you from whatever channels you found to be successful. And if you're taking that 1 in 4 number, even if you cut that in half,
Mhm, mhm.
there's a good 10 to 15% of your traffic who you might be pushing to your site, who's trying to engage with you, who's trying to do business, but because it's not accessible, they simply can't, and the doors are shut. So I like to think of it as a way of just making the money you're already spending that much more efficient and that much more effective at whatever those goals are for your business.
Yeah, and I like that way of thinking about it as if you compare it to the physical world, because I think that that's a perfect analogy because uh, most people wouldn't think of that off the bat. Like you said, it's like having no automatic doors on your website. Like, they're heavy doors that you need to push open. So I think that's a great way of framing it. And so, what are some of the key ways that you can make your brand more accessible, or you can communicate that your brand is really genuine about making your all your digital content as accessible as possible.
Yeah, so there's a few things you can do. One is just really starting off with an understanding of where your site is.
Hmm.
I think, which sounds super basic, but a lot of people, I think another misperception is that they probably assume that we're probably somewhat inaccessible, but it's probably usable by most
Hmm.
people with disabilities, whatever technology they're using. But the reality is, when we actually dig into it for the majority of websites, they find hundreds of issues per page on their site. So that's not the whole website, that's per
Hmm.
page, hundreds of issues that repeat themselves. And the reason we see so many, as an example, there's like three top issues that are
Hmm.
common across all sites, across industries. One is images.
Hmm.
Right, think of how many images are on the typical web page. Links, which again, you're always pointing somewhere, right? CTA everywhere.
Hmm.
And then finally, forms, which are really the linchpin of conversion, no matter
Right.
what your site is. And so, with images, that involves descriptive alt text. So that screen reader for a person who's blind is reading the alt text of the image to understand what's happening on the page and how that image is, supporting the content that exists
Yeah.
there.
And I have to say on that one, on the alt text and images and stuff, I feel that's an area where a lot of people just get really lazy.
$100%.
Especially if you're updating sites and you're constantly they're just like, oh yeah, I got the image, throw it up there and just ignore the alt text.
That is 100% accurate. And then what also compounds that is images are used, repeated on a site, right? So if you're lazy on the
Yeah.
homepage, that same image might find itself 10, 15 other places throughout your site, and that
Mhm.
laziness carries over.
Yeah.
So,
And
and that's the same principle with links
yeah.
as well, right? Like if you're not giving the right context and the right information, then that user isn't able to follow them. And again, going back to SEO, when you are descriptive, the content there is scraped by the engines, and so it's easier and giving you better SEO results as well.
Mm. How is AI going to impact accessibility?
Yeah, so we approach accessibility really from a multi-pronged approach in terms of the solution at
Mhm.
AudioEye. Part of it is automation and technology. Part of it is human audits and expert audits who are going in and actually going through the site with a screen reader or assistive technology. So automation right now, which is, put some JavaScript on your site,
Mm.
it'll go through and identify when alt text is insufficient or missing and do what it can to fix that. And automation, though, at the moment can only fix about 50% of issues automatically. You
Mhm.
still do need those human audits to happen. We're starting to work with AI, which is becoming week over week, right, better at understanding context and at understanding reasoning. And so I think really the solution to accessibility on the internet is going to be with AI, and
Mm.
AI is going to help technology maybe get us to 80, 90% of the solution. I don't know that we'll ever get to a point where a human doesn't have to do something in
Right.
terms of understanding the experience. But as a note, the internet has been inaccessible. Yeah, the number that's out there is 96% of the internet is inaccessible, and
Mm.
part of the reason that that number hasn't changed over the last decade is that the scale of the growth of the internet, the scale of the changes and growth of sites themselves is just continuing to evolve, right? So, truly, the only way to catch up, and then the only way to stay ahead of it
Yeah.
and create truly accessible sites is with AI, and we're nowhere close yet, but that is the solution of the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said earlier, I mean, you got to reorient your thinking a bit, don't you? Rather than looking at it and saying, here in the US, saying, oh, well, it's an ADA, I just need to be compliant. And almost like that's a nuisance, right? These kind of things
Hmm.
are in, and so we're treating people like nuisances rather than just a different person who has different needs and potentially, as you said, potentially driving business away. What about those companies that really pay attention to this? What happens with their customers in terms of loyalty?
It's a great question. People with disabilities, I mean, this is my personal opinion on the matter.
Mhm,
When I say what I'm about to say, which is I think they're one of the most loyal groups out there, and there's data to back it up. But I go as far to say one of the most loyal groups because it's really hard for them to find. We'll use e-commerce as an example, right? To find a place they can go online and shop for clothes in an easy and um, you know functional manner. So
mhm,
when they do find a site that they find is accessible, that they find is prioritizing people with disabilities, right? They're immediately like, I'm coming back here. They're telling their other friends who
mhm,
have similar disabilities about that site. And so they've got over $1 trillion of disposable income globally that becomes loyal uh, income. And what we've also found, which is even greater, is that they talk to their friends and family. So
mhm,
those around them who don't have disabilities but want to support organizations that support their loved ones, they
mhm,
are also loyal to these organizations. So you're not just tapping in to this group of people with disabilities, you're tapping into that extended network of friends and family, which has an $18 trillion purse globally. So it's just a huge, huge opportunity, especially again, going back to like you're spending all this money to acquire new customers. So at the top end, you're opening the door to more people who are already being sent to your site. And then once you convert them, you've got a much more loyal and lower churn rates when it comes to people with disabilities.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, if you're and a lot of companies do this, they're like, we're people centric,
Right.
we're customer
Yes.
centric, we're this centric, we really care. But then if they're just excluding a whole bunch of people because they can't be bothered or it's not a priority to make their site or their web assets accessible, then they're completely, again, that's a great dissonance between their message and the reality.
Mhm. Well, and I think one of the biggest challenges that marketers and business leaders have is seeing the world from a different lens than the one that they live in, right? And so
Mhm.
that's just a marketing challenge in general, but that is compounded once you add disabilities. Because I like to, comment that before I started working at AudioEye, I was at Adobe for years and years, creating content across all types of content, video,
Mhm.
PDFs, interactive experiences, and like this is focus group of one. Not one time did I think, is this PDF accessible to a person with a disability, right? Can these interactive experiences be
Right.
navigated with just a keyboard? Things like that. I just didn't know to ask those questions because, again, the world and
Mhm.
lens that I had didn't involve a disability, and so I think that's one of the reasons I like coming on podcasts like yours and talking about this is it helps people kind of realize, oh, there's this whole other segment of people, and it's not small that I hadn't even been considering.
Yeah, and it's not like, and I said, I didn't to portray people wrong. It's not like people deliberately go, "Oh, we're just going to exclude this bunch."
For
As you
sure.
said, it's more out of ignorance than anything.
Mhm.
And as you said, and filing it in the under the too hard, filing it under too hard or pushing it out there. Um, so, do you find a lot of times with companies that it's as simple as that they never really thought about the knock on impacts of this?
Yeah, I think it's that progression, which you actually just summarized very well, which is most people aren't even thinking about it.
Hmm.
The way they start thinking about it is they get a lawsuit and they're
Yep.
like, oh, oh, what's happening here? Or they come across it on LinkedIn or like a conversation like this, and it kind of it becomes illuminating to them. Then phase two becomes, all right, I know that this is important, kind of in my gut, like
Hmm.
to do.
Yeah.
But then, yes, where does it fall on my priorities? And then it becomes an exercise of not only educating that person on some of those business benefits and growth benefits and loyalty benefits, but then empowering them to share that internally within their organization. Because having one person buy in is good, but
Mhm.
especially as your company gets right bigger and bigger, you've got to get the CEO or the owner or the CMO on board as well. And
Mhm.
again, while that might always at the heartstring make a lot of sense, at the purse string,
Yeah.
that is a case that you need to build. And again, it's not that complicated, but we do need to build the business case still.
Yeah, and part of that business case can be the fact that you are running the risk of getting sued if you don't do it.
Yes.
I mean, which is if you're bringing an issue like this maybe to senior management, that's probably one that might get their attention. Even
Hmm.
beyond even though they may feel it's a nice thing to do, they probably wouldn't be jumping all over it. But when you tell them, well, it could cost us money not to do this.
Yeah. Well, and you can tell often, interestingly, depending on where the budget's coming from in the
Mhm.
company, what it was that got them interested. So, in some places, it's a compliance or a
Yeah.
legal budget.
Mhm.
In other places where they are looking at it as a growth driver, it's actually coming out of the MarTech budget. And they're
Right.
just saying, hey, 5% of our MarTech budget, we're going to invest in accessibility because we believe that that 5% makes the other 95% that much more efficient,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it is interesting to kind of see how each company thinks about it differently. But no matter how they're thinking about it or why they made the ultimate decision, all those benefits regardless, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of technologies and companies now that can help you with this, right?
For sure. Like that's I think another reason that people don't make movement initially is it seems very overwhelming. It is actually overwhelming. It doesn't
Mhm.
just seem it. Like there's a lot to learn about, to understand. How do I implement the best practices? How do I stay up to date
Especially
on the
that I haven't
latest?
been doing my alt texts for years, and then you're
Right,
suddenly
exactly.
like, "Oh, shoot."
Yeah, so I've got to do them all. And they've got to be accurate and
Mhm,
informative. But yeah, there are companies that help. And like I said, we use automation and people to
mhm,
help have more of a comprehensive. But it's really with automation that does allow you to take a good amount of the issues and have them just resolved automatically. So if you do miss the alt text, or you've got a team that is focused on it, but they're going to miss stuff as teams move fast
mhm,
and you got to hit certain deadlines. So it really is. We are in a place where, thanks to technology, thanks to experts who can do audits, they really can take a lot of the burden off of internal teams, so that
mhm,
those teams can rely on accessibility experts to help them become compliant, help them create digital experiences that work for all of their potential customers, and still allow them to focus on
mhm,
their growth goals, their
mhm.
personalization efforts, and things like that.
And you still see today, a lot of companies who still are maybe they'll do all that work, on their website and all of that, but then they don't do the mobile. They don't optimize the mobile, or they don't make the mobile. I mean, even just for regular, and then they don't, make the mobile accessible. So, I mean, and we live in kind of a mobile first world now. So, how important is it to make sure that your accessibility extends to mobile?
Yeah, I've been on a number of podcasts, and you're the first one to make that point, which I think is super astute, because that's actually a spot where companies will say, "Hey, we've made our desktop
Yeah,
uh, experience accessible," and they'll stop there, right? And,
mhm,
and the reality is, more and more, I think you said we're kind of in a mobile first.
yeah,
I would take that
yeah,
even further and say
yeah.
we
We are.
are
Hmm.
mobile first, and it's going there even more rapidly. And yeah, so that becomes a big gap. A lot of the things that you put in the desktop experience will translate to mobile,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, mobile is a different beast, and there
Hmm.
are certain issues that do exist only on a responsive mobile site. And
Yeah.
so, like, we actually work with companies to say, hey, here's the automation, here's the audits we can do for your desktop environment. Let's also look separately at your responsive mobile experience and make sure that we're not missing anything, and really giving you a false sense of compliance. And
Hmm.
by the way, that also translates to mobile apps, right?
Yeah.
So those are
Absolutely.
in of them themselves a completely different beast, but it's something that can be audited and reviewed for accessibility also.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's one of those things that you have to look at your your browser version, then your mobile. You got to look at them differently. You've got to have a strategy for both, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's despite the fact we live in a mobile first world, we still default to the corporate website, and the browser based one, just because that's what we do.
Yeah. Well, and again, think about it like we live in forget a mobile first world. We live in a digital world
Mhm.
where most of what I did today, yesterday, whether it was like finance related, news related, staying in touch with friends and family, work, 90% of it is digital, right?
Yep.
It allows me to not leave my house
Hmm.
as often as I may have a decade ago.
Yep.
I'm getting all these things done digitally. So a person with a disability wants that same freedom. And in many cases where it is harder for them to leave the house, that living that digital world is a key to them getting things done and living a full life, not
Hmm.
only digital life, their full life. And so that also translates to mobile because they use mobile because mobile devices have a lot of accessibility features built in. So they're probably arguably on mobile more so than other people. And so those mobile experiences are even more important for them.
Yeah, so you may have a way more engaged customer there that you didn't know about.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. Well, listen, thanks very much, Mike. This has been fascinating, a really important subject. All of Mike's information is going to be below this video, but before we go, please do remind people about what you do.
Yeah, so I mentioned work at AudioEye, where we work with businesses of all sizes to understand where they're at in their accessibility journey. If that's we have no idea where we're at, or we're doing something but we want to scale it and do it better. So I'd say if you're new to accessibility, go to audioeye.com. We have throughout this site a place where you can scan your own website, and it'll come back to you and say, "Hey, here's how many errors we found. Here's the common types of errors we found on your
Mhm.
site," and it'll tell you, are you compliant or are you at risk of being sued. And a little spoiler alert, if you're not doing anything now, you're probably not compliant and you're probably at risk of being sued. But again, it's a great start to just understand, where's my site at, what opportunities do we have. So I'd say start there, and then there are a lot of opportunities about how you can be successful from there, but just start with understanding where your site's at.
Yeah, and just think it's a pretty simple equation, isn't it? You can wait around to get sued, which will cost you money,
Right.
or you can proactively do it, which actually might gain you money because you're going to appeal to an audience that you've never appealed to before, and one that we've discussed can be a very loyal and engaged customer.
Yes, I've never thought of this before, but it's an insurance plan that actually pays you back compared to, right, an insurance plan that just is going
That just goes out
into.
the yeah, exactly, exactly. That is a super point though, just for in finishing for everyone here is yes, it's going if you don't do it, it could cost you money, but it may already be costing you money because you're losing out on this audience. It could actually be gaining you money. So therefore, the ROI on it is pretty obvious.
Yeah, love that.
All right. Well, listen, thanks again, Mike. Thank you for watching and listening. See you all again very soon. Thank you.